Today is a day I've been looking forward to a lot, to talk about one of my favorite directors, Edgar Wright. Besides Tom Cruise and wanting to explore his whole film career on here, Edgar Wright was the second person I wanted to do next because he is this massive director that is also my favorite director, and I always wanted to watch everything he has done, so therefore I can really say he is my favorite director. That's just the person who I am. So, welcome to the A-List. Welcome back to another episode of the A-List. Today we are covering Edgar Wright's filmography and whatever the hell he has done in his career, which is quite a bit, as you'll see through this video. But like I said, I am a massive fan of Edgar Wright. Two of his movies that he has made has become two of my favorite movies of all time in my top 10. I can say that with pride. And also making one of the best trilogies that don't really connect besides one little ice cream, the Cornetto Trilogy, which we'll get into why it's called the Cornetto Trilogy in general, because I've learned that through many experiences of watching all these things he's done. So that will be interesting in itself. So I'm very excited to get into that. But before we even get into anything, we got to learn about his life. So let's get into that.
Edgar Wright was born in Poole, Dorset, and grew up predominantly in Wells in Somerset. He attended the Blue School, Wells, from 1985 to 1992 and is honored by a plaque at the school. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, he directed many short films, first on a Super 8 camera that was a gift from a family member, and later on a Video 8 camcorder that he won in a competition on the television program Going Live. These films were mostly comedic pastiches of popular genres such as the superhero-inspired Carbolic Soap and Dirty Harry tribute Dead Right, which was featured on the DVD release of Hot Fuzz. From 1992 to 1994, Wright attended the Bournemouth and Poole College of Arts, now Art University of Bournemouth, and received an ND in Audiovisual Design. In June 2018, Arts University Bournemouth awarded Wright an honorary fellowship alongside graphic designer Margaret Calvert, costume designer Jenny Bevan, and dancer Darcy Bussell. On receiving the award, Wright said, "I'm thrilled to accept my honorary fellowship from AUB, or as I knew it back in 1992, the Bournemouth and Poole College of Arts and Design. I still think very fondly of my time spent there." Wright made his feature film debut in 1995 with a low-budget, independent spoof western, A Fistful of Fingers, which was picked up for a limited theatrical release and broadcast on the satellite TV channel Sky Movies. Despite Wright's dissatisfaction with the finished product, it caught the attention of comedians Matt Lucas and David Williams, who subsequently chose him as the director of their Paramount Comedy Channel production Mash and Peas. During this time, he also worked on BBC programs such as Is It Bill Baisley?, Alexi Sale's Merry-Go-Round, and Sir Bernard's Stately Homes. In an interview with journalist and author Robert K. Elder for the film That Changed My Life, Wright attributes his edgy and comedic style to his love for The American Werewolf in London. I've always been fascinated by horror films and genre films, and horror films harbored a fascination for me and always have been something I've wanted to watch and wanted to make. Equally, I'm very fascinated by comedy. I suppose the reason that this film changed my life is that very early on in my film watching experiences, I saw a film that was so sophisticated in its tone and what it managed to achieve. The critical success of Spaced paved the way for Wright and Pegg to move to the big screen with Shaun of the Dead, a zombie comedy which mixed a Brit flick romantic comedy style with homages to the horror classics of George A. Romero and Sam Raimi. The film was a success critically and financially, and its roots in American genre cinema helped to make it an international hit. The pair subsequently planned out a trilogy of British genre comedies which were connected not by narrative but with their shared traits and motives. The trilogy was named the Three Flavors Cornetto Trilogy by the pair due to a running joke about the British ice cream product Cornetto and its effectiveness as a hangover cure. Wright explained to Clark Collis in an interview for Entertainment Weekly, "We put that joke in Shaun of the Dead, where Nick asked for a Carmelo first thing in the morning. When I was at college, it was my hangover cure. Probably still is my hangover cure. Then we put it in Hot Fuzz because we thought it would be a funny recurring thing. One journalist in the United Kingdom said, 'Is it going to be your theme as a trilogy?' Then I said yes. It's like the Krzysztof Kowalski's Three Colors trilogy. This is the Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy. It was just a joke that stuck. Collis observes that the films also feature a running gag involving garden fences. The second installment was the comedy action thriller Hot Fuzz. Production started in March 2006, and the film was released in February 2007 in the United Kingdom and April 2007 in the United States. It revolves around Peg's character, Nicholas Angel, a police officer who is transferred from London to rural Sanford, where grisly events soon take place. In 2007, Wright also directed a fake trailer insert for Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez's Grindhouse called Don't. It was a plotless trailer that mocked horror cliches with lines such as, "If you are thinking of going into this house, don't." In 2010, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was released. Its over $85 million budget dwarfed the £8 million budget of Hot Fuzz. The film, based on the graphic novel series Scott Pilgrim, was co-written, co-produced, and directed by Wright. It took in roughly half its budget in the box office, in spite of its critical reception and praise from fellow directors such as Kevin Smith, Quentin Tarantino, and Jason Reitman. In November 2011, The Adventures of Tintin, directed by Steven Spielberg, produced by Peter Jackson, and based on Hergé's The Adventures of Tintin, was released. Wright co-wrote the film with writing manager Joe Cornish and Stephen Moffat. The film also co-starred Wright's frequent collaborators Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. The third installment of the trilogy, The World's End, premiered in London on July 10, 2013. The film is about several friends who reunite when one decides to repeat a pub crawl they did 20 years earlier. They have to get to the World's End pub without ending up in the gutter to do this, but some unusual powers are at work, and what happens to them may determine what happens to humans as a species.
So, we start his story in 1993, where he just got out of film school and made his first short film that is called Dead Right. It's a 39-minute little movie, and as you can see in this whole little movie, it's very, very much like Hot Fuzz, where it is this story of a cop and his friends and taking things really seriously, but it's a comedy. This whole thing is a comedy. And you can really see that within his whole effects here. So here's the thing about Edgar Wright. As you see him through his whole filmography here, as you continue, he has those quick cuts and his movies go really fast. You don't really see that a lot here. It's there, but you don't see it a lot here. The comedy is the most important thing about this movie, because this movie was only actors of his friends that were in this movie, and they all made it together. And the comedy is brilliant in this movie, which makes me love it even more, and really seeing how he progresses through his film career to this, which I would say after watching these, I was talking to people and I was like, I want to see more of Edgar Wright go back to this stuff, because this stuff is great. It's breaking the fourth wall. It has this simple comedy and it's funny. And this was filmed in 1993 and it's still funny, and is a short film, a low budget, and I loved it, which is very surprising for me because I find a little hard time to connect to movies that are short films, and I enjoyed this a lot. This was so good. I think I even gave it quite a bit of stars on Letterboxd when I reviewed it right when I watched it. So I did enjoy this, and I would like to see him do more of this, because you definitely see the influence of Edgar Wright. It's also noted in here that he has made a lot of movies. With those have also become his producing role and also writing it. He loves to write, and we'll see that he usually has a partner with doing that, and one of those people is Simon Pegg, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So then it comes 1995, where Edgar Wright made his first low budget movie that's basically kind of a sequel to Dead Right and being the same type of movie but a Western, and that is A Fistful of Fingers. You're probably wondering, how did you watch this? It's almost impossible to find, but I found a version online that I could watch, and I was so happy about it because I really wanted to watch it. And this is so good. It's so funny. The same thing with Dead Right. It does everything perfectly. It has that amazing comedy. Again, it doesn't really have that really quick editing. It's there, but it doesn't really get to that until his later stuff. And also, you really, really see the music influences in here, which is a major reason why I love Edgar Wright, because I'm a massive music fan, and when movies and music come together, it is the greatest thing in the world to witness. It is just beautiful. And this is the beginning of it. and we really see him get really deep in here. And his directing is something else in this. You see him in the movie. It goes through many different types of filming and all this stuff that he does in the techniques, which is super, super extraordinary. But I will say, after this movie, you don't really see this that much, what they did, breaking the fourth wall or anything. You do see the comedy there. You definitely see the comedy from this going to his later movies in the Cornetto Trilogy. And it is also just kind of crazy to see how talented this dude is, because he's gone through 3 different major phases in his career, where you got the beginning of the comedy, not really stylized, but it's this comedy that's really fitting. Then he goes into the fast editing, music heavy, comedy based movies with the Cornetto Trilogy. Then he moves on to the more different genre type of things, like we have Baby Driver, Scott Pilgrim, and he also gets to the part where he's doing the current movie Last Night in Soho, which was supposed to come out this year but didn't, sadly, so missed that one. I don't know how that's going to be, but I'm telling you, I'm so excited. But let's move on to what he does next. So this is kind of where he takes his big dip into the world of entertainment. Even though he's done his little short movies and he wants to get into the business, he's been very, very critically acclaimed for those type of movies and getting jobs for little things. So in 1996, 1 year after A Fistful of Fingers, he came out with the miniseries called Asylum, which is a comedy show based for the Paramount Network at the time, and also was this big comedy thing that he was taking the style of those movies and making a comedy about mental health and these people going crazy. And again, a lot of people today might think this is not something to be making jokes about, but I watched at least the first episode of this show, and you can definitely see the horror themes that he is a massive fan of horror. You can watch him in any extra videos he has done in the past, and when he mentions a movie that he loves, it's basically a horror. And we do see those themes later on in his career. And this is one of the beginnings of those parts there. And again, this was the beginning of Spaced, if you guys are Space fans, which we'll get into. But anyways, this is where it started, the relationship with Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg. They both met in here, and that's how they became friends. And you also got the main other girl in Space that is also in here, that but both came together to write the script, but they take that opportunity to write Spaced. But let's talk about Asylum real quick. Yes, it's that very stylized, fast edits and fast cuts, transitions, all that stuff. Not a massive music part in this, which is surprising. But again, it's not really his show, needless to say. But he made it his own with the directing style he chose. And especially really seeing the relationship grow between Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright in this is something else in itself. So you really, really get to see that in this show. Would I recommend this? Yes, but with hesitation. Again, I only watched the first episode. Didn't really have an eager to watch the other episodes because I got a lot to get through his filmography. So I was like, you know what? I really want to dig my teeth into these other movies and watch the commentaries. So I was like, you know what? I'll risk this and then just kind of skip this, for example. So this kind of career kind of went in a weird spiral where he was the director and producer of many comedy shows in England. So he had these big roles. I watched a couple of them, but they're not his work. You know, you can basically kind of see him when he's directing, but not really. It's mainly the comedian that he's doing it for. And those were not interesting in his career. But I get it. You got to make some exceptions to get to where you want to be, which he currently is right now. But again, he had to go through these times to get to that point. And you definitely see that this was the time for him. So then after he did all those, I guess he rose his name through all those specials. And he created the show Spaced with Simon Pegg and Jessica Haynes, which are the main people in the show. And they also both appeared in Asylum. So there was that massive connection. They became friends, and that's how it was going. They, Jessica Haynes and Simon Pegg, wrote the script for this show. This was a massive, massive show when it came out. It aired for 2 seasons only, and it was 13 episodes each, and it came from 1999 to 2001. This is where you saw the love and birth of Edgar Wright. So first thing when you're looking at Edgar Wright as a director, first you're looking at those transitions. They are here. They're very, very present here. And you definitely recognize everything that is going on as an Edgar Wright style. As watching his previous movies to this, it's definitely there. Then, when you go into the other things, music is a massive present. There is a massive, massive, massive music impression on this show. And you can definitely see it and hear it through every episode of this show. Number 3, the movies that he loves are very, very present in this show. There are massive movie reference. It is crazy how many. And as a movie fan myself, it was amazing to watch them. So when seeing the passion of music and movies come together into a show with people that he likes working with, it was something extraordinary to watch. And honestly, this show was great. It just was. It fit everything for Edgar Wright in his style, and it made everything go well watching it. And it did not feel dated. It felt great. And even watching it, reference to his newer movies are coming out. It's kind of crazy to see, which I loved. And don't forget, you got the beginning of Simon Pegg and Nick Frock's relationship that goes on to the Cornetto Trilogy, which is all here too. There are so many things here. And even cameos, strong cameos in any of his movies are present in here. And those cameos come from here, which is crazy in itself and is beautiful to see because you get those payoffs. Even though if they're not connected, you get those payoffs because Edgar Wright loves movies, loves the fandom, loves his fans, and you'll definitely hear that presence as we continue. But like I said, this was a massive show for Edgar Wright. He had massive fans. Even people were clamoring for Blu-rays, but it didn't come out for years. Also, it definitely shot him up in fame. People wanted to see him. So therefore, he got his first movie, which is the first movie in the Cornetto Trilogy, and that is, of course, Shaun of the Dead. So Shaun of the Dead was in 2004. But I do want to note, in 2002, he came out with a music video by one of his favorite bands that he's mentioned, Mint Royale Blues Song. This is a strong reference to Baby Driver. And if you watch this, you'll definitely hear that connection, see it. That is a prequel basically to Baby Driver right here. So if you guys want to check that out, I would definitely suggest it. But again, Shaun of the Dead. Spaced was massive. It was this massive, massive, massive show that came out that people were loving. And there was many forums coming out at the time. There were so many people clamoring for Shaun the Dead. So one of the massive problems that came in with Shaun the Dead was they needed a bunch of zombies. They had the people that they wanted connected to it. Of course, you got Jessica Haynes coming back for a small role. Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, they love each other. They're friends. Of course, they go for it. But one of the massive things of Shaun the Dead was the music in it. And again, he had to scramble to find the right songs, even throwing records at zombies. But one of the major things that you hear through the commentary of Shaun the Dead is he basically knew everyone that was on set. Most of the hordes of zombies were fans from space. They called out to a Reddit, and they all came for Edgar Wright's movie. They all helped him out. That's how massive space was. And people were willing to help. They loved Edgar Wright. This was the boom of Edgar Wright's fame. And also, there was this massive connection to space. So the music, the characters had this massive connection to the movie. So we're at the point of Edgar Wright's career when Shaun the Dead's being made, which is something that he's always wanted to do and made movies and going through small competitions to win a new camera and all that, even making a Super 8 film that he won. This is just so many stories that he has finally gotten to the point where he can make movies. And this was massive for him. And you see everything from space into this style continues, but more music heavily, even to the point of throwing records. Like on this special edition, you have a record, and these are massive for him. And he talks about how music is a massive thing for him in movies and how he wants to convey things and how big of a fan he is. Even he's directed so many music videos, you can see that in him. And especially with making a whole movie like Baby Driver, where music was the biggest influence on the movie. But then it got to the point of he loved this cast. He loved working with these people. Could he do more of it? And how could he do it? And does he want to connect it? So he decided he wanted to connect it, and having the same people, the same two characters be the main characters of every single iteration of his Cornetto Trilogy. But I promise to you, how was the Cornetto Trilogy called the Cornetto Trilogy? At first, when I was exploring it, not even before I was just an Edgar Wright fan in general and knowing why people were going to call it, I was like, is that a person that wrote it? Is it two people that directed it, wrote it? It was the thing that always confused me. So going to look it up and find it and watch commentaries, including on this track, learning how every space people were zombies, which was just massive in itself, but learning what the Cornetto meant. So Cornetto is an English ice cream that would be Edgar Wright's hangover cure. So every time he got a hangover, he would eat Cornetto ice cream. And you're probably wondering where this shows up in the movie. It's not really mentioned, and it does. In the very beginning of the movie, we see Nick Frost wanting a Cornetto, so Simon Pegg goes and gets one as he gets a Coke. So there you go. So Shaun of the Dead was this massive hit that everyone loved. It was this new style that no one has seen before, and it was praised for that. Even people going back to look on his old stuff that he has made, including Spaced, to really know who Edgar Wright was, and people got that. They loved it. Even coming out with these short things, but right after he decided he wanted to get back in there, so he created the movie that was basically based off his first short film, Dead Right, and it is Hot Fuzz. So it stars Simon Pegg, Nick Frost again. Simon Pegg wrote it with Edgar Wright. Same thing, different concept, same people, still part of the Cornetto Trilogy. So this movie was also a big hit, and people loved it. I remember when this came out in 2007 that people were praising it, and I remember seeing DVD copies all the time at Blockbuster when this movie came out. It was this massive thing to me that I never watched because I wasn't old enough. So watching it for the first time last year, it was like, wow, I love this. I want to go fully deep on Edgar Wright, and I think he'll be my favorite director. And since then, of course, he is my favorite director, and I love Hot Fuzz so much. But again, it's different, but it's also a lot like Dead Right. I'm telling you, if you guys have not seen Dead Right, you can watch it on YouTube. I'll probably link it in the description so you guys can watch it. It is so similar, it's crazy. But again, the difference is we have the two main characters played by different people, but the main character is literally identical to the main character of Dead Right. So, of course, you have Simon Pegg as the main character, Angel, and this was a massive thing. I'm telling you. Even to the point where people were praising Shaun of the Dead, that people like famous actors like Jim Broadbent, who showed up in the movie, was this person that showed up to be in the movie. Edgar Wright was even approached by Jim Broadbent saying, hey, I want to be in one of your movies, and that's how we got into it. Also, we have this massive thing with Timothy Dalton, a Bond, which as you hear in the commentary track with this, and I kid you not, of him praising Timothy Dalton. And this was massive for Edgar Wright as a person and his filmmaking career, that he really, really loved him being in this movie and definitely took his character to the 10th degree to make sure he was getting the praise that he deserved because he loved Timothy Dalton. So that alone should be surprising to you guys because Edgar Wright takes everything so seriously and puts 110% effort, and he loves the craft of film and music, and that's why I love him. But as we're into this, and as I hold this up, and I also pull this up, just to get my point across, there is this company called Everything Blue, and they make these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful steelbook packs. I'm not sponsored by here. But their company started purely based on Edgar Wright's movies as these custom packs. You can get a big beefy one or just like the simple steelbook with a couple things in it. That's what I have here. And these are awesome to have. But that shows you how powerful these movies are alone, of them starting their company with these movies and them selling out in literally minutes. So, in the same year, he got to work with some of the biggest people in the film business in 2007, and he made a trailer called Don't for the movie Grindhouse, which was one of the commercials that was in the movie Grindhouse with Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez. He got to do that. This was massive, even becoming friends with both of them for his future movies, and you hear that through the commentary tracks that I have listened to. Don't was another approach of his horror love. We finally get to see some type of horror with Edgar Wright for Last Night in Soho, which I'm super curious about because he finally gets to work in a genre that he loves so much and one of the things that influences him the most. But we definitely see that in this little trailer, and it's funny. His comedy's in it and horror, as we see. And both of these themes of Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead definitely have horror themes. Aliens to a point of zombies. So everything has that comedy and horror vibe. But Edgar Wright kind of got tired of it, and he went to take a break to do something else that he was passionate about. And of course, we're talking about Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. As you can see, I love this movie. Even the comic book series that is based on is my favorite comic book series of all time, if not comic book. One of the things I remember when I watched the movie for the first time, I did not read the comic book at first. I love the movie so much, I wanted to get anything I can grab my hands on for Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim is a massive movie to many comic book fans in general. But the thing is with Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, one of the biggest things that people talk about it is how it went from comic book to film and how identical it is. Even going from book one of Scott Pilgrim to what it currently is literally comic book to movie. Even things like when Knives Says Loves, that is literally a panel from the comic book. And what was really interesting to me is because I've always wanted to hear what the comic book creator had to say about the movie. So on the Blu-ray, there was this commentary track with the writer plus Edgar Wright and the author of Scott Pilgrim. And anyone that would be having their comic book on there, something would probably not make them happy. But Edgar Wright somehow made this author very happy when he made this movie. And most of his stuff was in it. Even the little details that Edgar Wright put so much effort into was a massive thing for this author. And of course, Scott Pilgrim came out in 2010. And again, we finally get to see the love of Edgar Wright's music, especially in a movie where he can put that front and center. Plus, putting video games into a movie and making it feel funny and real. This is one of the best movies I have ever seen and never gets old. Everything is amazing down to the point where Evie Adams is saying Black Sheep, which is one of my favorite scenes in movie history. So in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, you got a massive cast. And at the time, they probably weren't a massive cast because it was before Chris Evans. And I think Brandon Routh just became Superman. But again, these were massive actors that he got. He had so much praise for Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz that people were going crazy for these movies. And as soon as he got announced for this, people were losing their shit. But at the time, they did not know what they were doing. This movie did not perform well at the box office because this was not really a massive thing for people that were not comic book fans. But since then, this has become one of the biggest movie and biggest cult hits of all time. And people love this movie, down to them making pops that are selling for hundreds of dollars for this movie alone with different variations for the characters. Even becoming Funkos, one of their biggest lines ever to hit their shelves. Even making different iterations of steelbooks and other merchandise for Scott Pilgrim. This movie blew up. Even the actors in this movie blew up in some type of way, even becoming bigger when they already were because people were loving this. This was the perfect pairing for Edgar Wright, where he can have his style, which fits with the comic book setting, and working with music and doing something with video games, because that is very referenced in many episodes of Spaced. 3 years later, he came back to the Cornetto Trilogy to finish it off with The World's End in 2013. Again, Simon Pegg and Nick Frost returned, Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright writing, and also having a massive cast that people you probably want to recognize, but somehow do now because of this movie. This is also one of the movies that people think is the weakest of the trilogy, but honestly, I have come to love it, probably even more than Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz on this rewatch for this series. I love this concept for a movie, the Golden Mile, and how he edits it, and how he has basically an 80s movie within this movie at the very beginning. It is amazing. And also a movie about addiction. This movie is about an alcoholic. And honestly, I have dealt with addiction in my life not me personally, and family reasons. And usually movies that deal with that connect with me. So this movie definitely hit with me as I watched the commentary and how they were doing things and how it's a redemption story for a addiction person, and how at the end he finally gets his feelings out of bottling it up and even going to a mental ward and learning all these things about his character. This is something that they personally were trying to do. And as you hear in the commentary of this movie, you hear that this is Edgar Wright's favorite character he has ever played as because of so many levels that he is. Also, this movie was very, very emotional for the cast in general. It was the end of this trilogy. Even having a point where they're fighting in the movie, Nick Frost and Simon Pegg, and even going to tears because they never done this. They were always friends in the movie. That's why this movie meant so much to everyone making it. There went so much detail into this movie, even the pubs that are named, there are references like in Scott Pilgrim with numbers and how much Edgar Wright cares about everything that's in his movie. It's not just saying, oh, here you go. It's not one of those. It's something that is massive for Edgar Wright and cares about every little detail, even music and how everything is portrayed, and even how the addiction part is a massive underlining, but you can definitely see it within the movie. And again, to continue what happens with the Cornetto and how that relates, in Hot Fuzz, you see them eating ice cream, which is the Cornetto, and the cop car. Twice you see that happen. And this, it's very subtle. At the very end of the movie, you see a mint Cornetto across the chain fence. So therefore, they even mention in there that they thought they were going to troll everyone and not even put it in there, and they decided to. So again, they realize how big this meant to people, and I definitely understand that. And this movie means a lot to me in general. I loved it on this rewatch, and I'll praise it. Even I've said to people, and you're like, you're crazy to think this is your favorite. It might always change. I love all three of the movies. I love them all. This time around, this one hit me the most. I don't know what to say. It happens. That's the beauty of Edgar Wright. So, we get to 2017, where his last his film was. There was supposed to be a movie in 2020, but got postponed to 2021. I'm very, very sad. But again, we have to talk about my second favorite movie of all time. Bear in mind, at the time of this recording, the Ansel Elgort allegations and things that I don't know have been proven or not. This has been recorded. During that, I don't know anything. So keep that in mind when I'm talking about this movie. And of course, I'm talking about 2017's Baby Driver. This is my second favorite movie of all time. I love it. Day one, I saw this movie, I was shocked, and I saw the movie the next day. I don't ever do that. And the movie that created that for me was Baby Driver. There has never been a movie that has ever made me feel this way, ever. This movie I praised to everyone, even talking about every little detail, and everyone knows how big music is in my life. I can't go to sleep without listening to music. And the reason I love music so much is it means a lot, and the meanings in them and the beats. And I wish that people would use music more in that type of style, less score-wise and more soundtrack-wise for their movies. And the one director that I have ever seen that do the best is Edgar Wright. Even going to the point of collecting vinyls when this movie came out so I could collect these of Edgar Wright's. And Baby Driver is, like I said, my second favorite movie of all time. Day one, I heard about they were making Funko Pops, pre-ordered them. I had them all. I wish they would make Deborah and more characters. Even going to the point of building Lego brick heads that were not even out to buy certain pieces to make them because they meant so much to me. Edgar Wright had this concept, and it came to fruition of having a car chase and thinking that what if it was edited by music, because he loves music so much and it's massive to him. And just listening to his commentaries talk about how music and how it affects him and how he knows all these band names of people I've never heard of, that should tell you enough. This was also Edgar Wright's biggest cast yet. You got people like John Hamm, Lily James, Jamie Foxx. So needless to say, this movie blew me away. The editing and how the music went is beautiful. The soundtrack is unforgettable. And making a person smile like Lily James is nothing I've ever seen in film. Even the action scenes are beautiful in this movie. Parkouring, which is amazing, seeing baby characters go through that, which is just extraordinary to see. The characters are beautiful and amazing. And every single part of this movie I love, and it's infused with Edgar Wright. And technically, you don't really have that massive editing. Of course, you had the walk by or passing thing kind of edits from Scott Pilgrim. You hear that, but you don't see that a lot in this movie. So it was so good to see this story and music being a main part of it, a main character, I would say. And learning this story and learning the characters and loving the way it looks, loving the way it sounds. Nothing has ever given me this feeling besides one other movie in my life, The Color of Money. Baby Driver always will ever, for now, currently in 2020, will sit as my second favorite movie of all time. But of course, I can't go along without talking about the current things going on and what has happened in the past. This movie has had a lot of troubles for me. And because it's one of my favorite movies of all time, anything that happens with this movie breaks me to some points. But I know I love this movie and I always will, because every time something happens like that, I find myself to build my way back up from those problems and love it even more, to basically praise it for the rest of my life. And of course, I'm talking about Kevin Spacey in this movie. Learning later that year that he did this, and it was disgusting. And yes, it left a bad taste in my mouth. But a couple months later, I sat down to watch it to see if it affected for me. And no, it didn't. Kevin Spacey's good in the movie. That doesn't mean he's a good person. He's good in the movie as this character. I love him as this character. I do not like him as a person. And I watched it and I'm like, he's good. He's really good in this role. I like him in this role. But he dies in it. So that's the one positive. And the hardest one yet that I'm still dealing with as we speak is Ansel Elgort. Yes, he has been accused of sexual allegations, which look 99% chance that he did it. It's heartbreaking to me because Baby Driver is one of my favorite movie characters of all time. And watching it after hearing this yesterday, the day I'm recording this is a day after hearing all these things, I found myself to be able to watch it. Because if you really know Ansel Elgort from his social media things or just in general, he is nothing like the character of Baby. So I can enjoy Baby as a character and who he is. And I love this movie still. It's very difficult seeing people trash this movie and getting rid of it because of a terrible human being doing something this to people that love it. Even people like Ansel Elgort, getting rid of him. Totally understandable. But as a human being and a person, I can't get rid of this movie. I just can't. Doesn't mean I don't like Ansel Elgort anymore. I don't like Kevin Spacey. They're good in the movie. I love the characters. I don't know what else to say about it. I love this movie. And I owe it all to Edgar Wright. Again, it's going to be hard to watch for the rest of my life because of these things. But I'll get through that, and I'll still praise it, and I won't let that stop me, because Edgar Wright is my favorite director. This is one of my favorite movies, and, I got to praise my favorite director and one of my favorite movies because it means a lot to me. So overall, as you have seen, Edgar Wright is an amazing filmmaker that kills everything that he does and knocks it out of the park every time. That is something that's very, very difficult to do, and his track record is 10 out of 10, and most people agree with me. A lot of people don't like The World's End, but I feel like people need to give it a rewatch because I think it's a great little movie. He's just amazing. I'll always talk about Edgar Wright. This was a fun experience and a fun journey and a hard journey of going through filmography of Edgar Wright. But guys, if you want to check out more episodes of the A-List, you can. We have a playlist. And we also have a ending screen so you guys can see that. But if you guys want to see more, please subscribe to the channel. If you guys want to check out more content, t-shirt based in general, or you just want to check out Guideline in general and what it is, you can go to www.guidelineentertainment.com to get all the entertainment you need. But anyways, Edgar Wright was a great director. His editing, transitions, and music style just make him an A-list.